Shalom and good day, this is Tehillim29 back again for another anime series review. And for today's anime series, I'll be covering Onimusha, which is in technicality, I think it's meant to be a season 1 and we are meant to be expecting a season 2. So for this season, it has 8 episodes, to which they do vary in how big they are. The biggest or the starting episode is around 36 minutes long, and the last episode is around the same again, so 36 minutes. But in between that, we've got other episodes that are 26 to almost 30 minutes in length. So I'll get to starting in relation to the first episode and its title and synopsis, and also give a bit of a talk about each of the episodes. So, starting off with the first episode, it's titled Demon, to which we are introduced to the character of Miyamoto Musashi, who receives the Oni gauntlet for 33 days, so that's the length of time that he's allowed to borrow it for before it's meant to be returned to a temple which he received it from. But before he receives the gauntlet, he's pretty much put through a bit of a test of sorts. And with this test, we see a number of monks and warriors, or warrior monks, to which he must fight through. And this sort of lasts for, I guess, half of the episode. And the next half of the episode, we move into where the journey begins. So along with a reluctant chaperone to watch over the precious item, in regards to this, the chaperone who looks over the item is actually one of the priests from the temple, which he is asked to take with him. So, jumping into episode 2, which is called Mountain Demon. The men arrive in the village, but it seems to be abandoned. While exploring the area, they come across a little girl who's all on her own. Now, in this particular episode, we end up being introduced to the character of Sayo, spelled S-A-Y-O. And we learn that she too plays a little part in regards to the events that take place. But we don't get that until one of the next couple of episodes as to what led to the change in her village. And also, whilst they're at the village, they end up encountering what would be basically considered the undead, to which they must fight and kill off. So they certainly come up with some ideas as to fighting and killing off these particular demons, and also finding a way to escape. But in this journey as well, we learn that there are also some traitors within the band of samurai, to which Musashi is a part of, and they slowly will reveal who they are, or they will eventually show who they are. So jumping into episode 3, which is titled Nightmare. While leading the men to Lemon's fortress, Sayo notices something that there is strange about the path that they're taking. Now, this is the episode to which we learn where Sayo connects to the path that they are talking, or where they are walking on, and realizes that this is the place that this is where she found gold, and it also played a part in the destruction of a village, to which when she was found in episode 2, that Musashi and the rest of the samurai that were with him also had to fight to survive, and also in a way use the Oni gauntlet. So jumping into episode 4, it's titled Bewitch. The men arrive at the mountain temple and are confronted by 3 masked figures. Now, these 3 masked figures, we learned that are part of, say, a type of ninja clan of sorts, and they're of the Yoshioka family. We do end up meeting some more members of them also in the next episode. While Musashi fights them, Kaizen, Sahe, and Heikuro try to save Sayo. So in this event, whilst it's occurring, Sayo's life is in danger, and they also have to do their own thing to also try to make sure that she is safe in the journey. Episode 5 is titled Yin Soul, and we will get the opposition to this episode towards the last episode, which is called Yang Soul. In this episode, it's called Yin Soul. The synopsis that we're given here is the Yoshioka family isn't through with Musashi and his men yet with Sayo suffering from a fever. So, yes, we do actually see Sayo, who we do meet in this story. Something ends up occurring with the character, and she's taken down with a fever, and whilst this is happening and occurring, the other samurai that are with Musashi must make sure that she is attended to, basically for the fever, and that she's able to wake up from it. Sahe leaves to forage for medicinal herbs. So Sahe, being one of the members of the group, he's more so, I think Sahe is also the monk on the journey that is with them, and he does eventually die in the story. But for what he does in the time period, you can certainly see that as a monk, all he's known is like stuff from the temple. He's never really traveled outside of the temple except for this event revolving around Miyamoto Musashi. But at least he's been taught some skills that work towards, say, the healing of people, where there's also another member of the group who also has some skills, but in regards to poisoning people. And I'm not going to give away who that is. So we do eventually have Sayo recover from the fever, and it pretty much takes the whole episode for this to happen. But when this is occurring, she at least has someone there who is tending to her and her condition. And I must admit, if I were to compare this between Blue Eye Samurai and Onimusha, Onimusha is a higher grade story than Blue Eye Samurai. So that's just personally from me. Next episode is episode 6, to which, as the journey continues, episode 6 is titled Oni. A strange man named Alfred welcomes Musashi and his friends into the lavish Golden Mountain before politely but firmly asking them to join Lemon. Now, Lemon is pretty much the antagonist of this story, and you can certainly tell that Lemon himself has sort of like made a dark contract of sorts with like the underworld. And one of the things that which the Oni Gauntlet has been telling Miyamoto Musashi is that he must also kill members that are of the Genma. So Oni versus Genma. So we're seeing like the small spiritual connection as well as the physical connection between the characters. Of course, he politely refuses, and not long after that, he's sort of like brought into a fight against another person who we realize is sort of like his rival, and we'll get to see their rival, but not until Sayo ends up seeing her parents, not realizing that they're basically still under sort of like an undead curse. And one of the things, or not only that, due to what is occurring, Musashi realizes at the request of, say, her parents, because her parents don't want to see her turned into the undead, he pretty much fulfills the wish and desire of the parents so that she doesn't turn into the undead like they are and end up dying too. So with him fulfilling that requirement, she still lives in the story. Jumping into episode 7. Now, with episode 7, we get quite a bit of a flashback here. And we also get a little bit of a flashback in episode 8 as well when we move into it. Now, it's titled Harbinger. Years ago, Kensuke Matsuki acknowledged his young disciple. So this is basically the mentor of who taught swordsmanship and whatever, the way of the samurai to Lemon, or the character that is named Lemon. So we know that the character of Lemon himself does actually have another name, but we don't actually learn his actual name. But we do know that the name that he was given because of, in regards to his it says he decides to join him because of his wicked ambition. So one of the things that he practically dreams and desires of is a world without samurai. But this reason that he has to sort of like this world without samurai, because he has a little bit of foresight of sorts, and this seems to be like before he sort of like handed his life over to the underworld. And with these ambitions, he basically wants a united Japan, so united enough that it's able to take on its enemies. So he wants to basically unite Japan, even if it means taking out whoever the hell the head of it is in order to achieve that. Of course, you do get some members who disagree that it might not happen, and that is actually quite interesting. And it's within this episode as well that the fight continues between Miyamoto Musashi and his rival Kojiro. So jumping into last but not least, episode 8. Now, I must say that between these episodes, we have also lost members of the samurai that were working alongside with Miyamoto Musashi. So while escaping with Sayo, Sahe comes across Lemon, who begs and barters with him to save his life. Then the third traitor reveals themselves. So with this, we do sort of like learn that Sahe is sort of like the third traitor or third bad guy. And I must bring up that something at the first episode that begins is that in the first episode, Miyamoto Musashi sort of like relays across, like after receiving the gauntlet, that there are sort of like some traitors in the midst. And we do actually get to see that play out within the story. And this is where things do begin to take a little bit more of a change, a little bit further along in the story. But this time around, we do get to see Sahe, in a way, help Lemon, but only to, I guess, backstab him. In the process, we also see his opportunity to take Sayo with him, but she decides to stay behind and look for Musashi. And while she does end up finding Musashi, she sees Musashi fighting Kojiro. She notices that he is under the full influence of the Oni Gauntlet. And one of the things in relation to the Oni Gauntlet is that it must also be returned, like after he has completed his job. And in the time period to which this event takes place. So, whilst this is happening, she does end up catching up and finding Musashi after Sahe has basically left the scene. We don't know whereabouts he got to, so that sort of like leaves a little bit of a plot door open as to what will Sahe do next, maybe in the next season. Then there's a bit of a closeout scene to which we see Musashi continuing his fight with Kojiro, his rival. Now, we got to see a bit of a fight scene between Kojiro and Musashi, to which we learned that Kojiro basically fully handed himself over to being a Genma, and with it he ended up like having 4 arms to use, and it was during the fight a lot of things happening, including some spiritual type attacks that were used against Musashi, and it was sort of like during this fight that Musashi ends up handing himself over to the Oni Gauntlet, to which we do eventually later on have Sayo come in, help realize that he didn't need the gauntlet to fight, or he doesn't need the power of the gauntlet to defeat these particular enemies. I thought that was really good, but in the duration of that time, we are left with like a small closing gap to which we get to see Kojiro and Musashi fight alone, and then we're sort of like left with, okay, who won that fight? But I think the answer to that is in relation to the gauntlet, which happens towards the end of this particular episode. We do get to see Sayo escape, and as Sayo escapes with the help of one of the hawks, I believe it is, of one of the characters, Taro Maru, there was another one which ended up dying in the story. And they were basically like brother hawks in a way, or brother birds of prey. And with that, we end up next seeing the character of Sayo turning up at a village, and she's asking for like the best room of the house at an inn in Japan. We don't know whereabouts in Japan that this is happening. But of course, where they turn up at the inn, they do end up receiving some gold, and of course, okay, let's just give her wishes. And in the meantime, she also pulls out one of the priests, because the priest that was with him also died, and she ended up basically looking after his priestly necklace. And not long after that, we move to the end of the episode, to which the episode does return us to the very temple that we started at the beginning, to which the head of the temple receives a bit of a message that the gauntlet has been returned, which seems to lead one to think that, okay, it looks like Musashi did win his fight against Kojiro, but where he is now, we have no idea. So, jumping into the next thing, and that is in regards to my afterthoughts in regards to this particular story of Onimusha. I must admit, I have really enjoyed watching first to last episode of Onimusha. I definitely enjoyed the cast of characters. I found this story to be way more enjoyable than Blue Eye Samurai. Even the execution, it didn't treat injuries like a joke. Well, but it did at least let the audience know that there was actually a bit of fantasy involved, and that fantasy was sort of like involved in relation to, say, the supernatural objects and connection to some people within the story. That is the only time it did actually take place, but you were practically shown about that in the lore of the world really early in the story, and it was given a really well done or well executed story, to which we got like the location, we got not necessarily time, but we did get cast of characters, as well as a pretty decent soundtrack. I enjoyed the voice acting. So moving into the next thing, and that is the area of the rating of this story. So starting off with the area of the main cast of characters, which consisted of mainly Sire, in a way, sort of like doesn't become a main character until later in the story. So we're talking probably episode 4 to 5 that she sort of becomes a part of the main cast of characters. She joins the main cast of characters as a support character. But I did like how they introduced her. I liked how they showed her connection to the past in the village where they met her at, and how she also feels a certain sense of responsibility for her actions, of even just finding a little bit of gold that led to so much greed of people in the village, and through that, Lemon took advantage of that. So in that, we sort of see a bit of revenge from her, but the way she executes her revenge in the story is not how Mizu sort of executes her revenge in the story. But with the character being so young, they are very highly aware with like situations where in some cases, in like some other anime, they're not so much aware. The character Musashi, he is of course a main character. The other characters that we meet along with him, or the other samurai, we get to see and learn what some of their specialties are. Of course, one being more focused on healing herbs, the other one being focused on more killing. Whilst you also have one that's sort of like connected to a little bit of spirituality, so they have like a type of I guess New Age tarot cards. It was very similar to that. It's the only other way to put it. And yes, we end up losing these characters along the way, but I wouldn't really call them main characters. They're more like supporting characters. So for the main character along the way, or the main character that really ran this story, was actually the character Musashi, to which I give an 8.5 out of 10. Moving into the area of the supporting characters, and I'd also include that some of the supporting characters definitely also include some of the villains that played their role in the story too. So the villains being such as the Yoshioka ninjas that they came up against. Of course, Alfred, one of Lemon's lackeys, and also many other of the lackeys of Lemon that we end up having the characters go up against. For that, I give an 8 out of 10. Next is the area of the soundtrack. I quite enjoyed the soundtrack. Even though it wasn't used a lot, when it was used, it felt like it helped the story. So for that, I'll just give an 8 out of 10. Moving into the next area, and that is the area of the animation. I actually quite enjoyed the animation in this, to which I'll give an 8 out of 10, because it was consistent all the way through, along with the story and the way it was exercised and used in the story. Last but not least is actually the area of the story itself, to which I give an 8.5 out of 10. I would definitely like to see a second season of Onimusha, even if this were to say maybe continue with a new character other than Musashi, who was seen in the first. I think it would be quite interesting. But it might also return to the character of Miyamoto Musashi. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day. And if you happen to watch this series, what was your favourite character, let alone your favourite episode? Until then, have yourself an awesome day, and let's keep it colourful.